Part 2 of my exhaustive survey into the left's proclivities for violence, for political violence. Chapter 4, the assassination attempts on Donald Trump.
Really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
Then we have the biggest act of political violence in the last 30 years, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. The first attempt. Leftists will try to make the case that Thomas Crooks was a MAGA Republican, despite footage of him swearing he would slit Republican throats and dozens of posts on Gab where he passionately argued for Joe Biden's policies. He had also donated to Act Blue. Crooks had registered as a Republican, but this was a common ploy at the time Democrats were openly advocating for. To vote against him in an attempt to stop Donald Trump in the primaries before the general election. Then we have the second attempt on Donald Trump's life, when Ryan Ruth, a pro-Ukrainian fanatic, tried assassinating Trump while Trump played a round of golf at Mar-a-Lago. The left tried to deflect, calling Ruth a MAGA extremist because he had voted for Trump in 2016. What the left cynically fails to mention is the fact that Ruth and Trump's interests have sharply diverged since then. This guy was a recruiter for foreign fighters in Ukraine. I mean, he was straight plugged up. He was connected. He was definitely an asset, if you know what I mean. And here's the guy giving an interview to frickin' Newsweek. It's like, are you kidding me? This is so obvious.
As far as joining the military, yes, if you have some military experience or know people with military experience, encouraging them to come and fight. We have units all over the place. So, there were some leadership issues initially, but we've got so many units available to us: Georgian, Crimean, Ukrainian, Territorial Defense, Foreign Legion. We have, so many paramilitary groups. I put a 74-year-old Japanese guy in a unit. So, we have girls in units. So we have two girls that are in the unit up the street. So any gender, any age, any skill level to no skill level. But yeah, if you want to fight, come here and see me, and I'll put you in a unit so you can go fight.
I'll put you in a unit so you can fight. Who the fuck is this guy? What the fuck? And no, he's not former military. He's not a veteran. How in the hell did he get hooked up half a world away in Ukraine with hundreds of thousands, if not a million, I don't know how much money, to recruit fighters for Ukraine's Foreign Legion? Like, are you serious? Is this real? Is anyone else noticing this? So yeah, I don't think Ryan Ruth was MAGA. I consider it almost terroristic how the left actually tries to manipulate fools and naive idiots into believing that Trump supporters were trying to assassinate Donald Trump. That's the most ridiculous, asinine, silly assertion, allegation, theory, hypothesis that I've ever heard in my life. Thomas Crooks was obviously a little lib-T. You know what I mean? Ryan Ruth is obviously an asset. Thomas Crooks and Ryan Ruth were assets. They were used. Obviously. So yes, the two assassination attempts on Donald Trump definitely count as left-wing violence. It's the very epitome of left-wing violence. And another thing, no MAGA man dyes his hair. We don't do that effeminate crap. I challenge anybody watching this, if you can find an example of a MAGA man dyeing his hair blue or purple or whatever, post it in the comments. I bet you can't. There's not even that many MAGA women that do this. It's a characteristic of you libs, of you progs, short for progressives. MAGA, us men, real men, we don't dye our hair the colors of the rainbow. He's a leftist. Chapter 5, The Black Lives Matter riots of 2020. Black Lives Matter riots of late 2020 will go down in history as one of the most destructive series of civil disturbances in American history. Many Americans were murdered and assaulted. Some police officers died, while hundreds were injured. Over 140 American cities saw extreme violence, with arson, looting, and shootings terrifying citizens throughout the night. Law and order broke down. All the while, the Democrats set up bail funds for the rioters and openly encouraged the violence. They went on TV night after night, repeating their propaganda talking points, which the mainstream media parroted to the word. Leftists ran amok, openly flouting the law. Cities such as Washington, D.C., Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Kenosha, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Los Angeles, California, New York saw heinous amounts of rioting, among many others. Billions of dollars worth of property was burned down. Millions upon millions of dollars worth of property was looted. Entire neighborhoods were taken over by leftist mobs. People were assaulted, harassed, and singled out for racist attacks because of the color of their skin. Reporters said the quote-unquote protests were mostly peaceful, as buildings burned in the foreground. It was directed from the higher-ups and various media companies to nix the word riot for the words protest. It was a terrible time in America as the left cynically encouraged their street thugs to burn, pillage, and loot across the country. U.S. Department of Justice under Joe Biden. Press release. Over 300 people facing federal charges for crimes committed during nationwide demonstrations. Thursday, September 24th, 2020. The Department of Justice announced today that more than 300 individuals in 29 states and Washington, D.C. have been charged for crimes committed adjacent to or under the guise of peaceful demonstrations since the end of May. To date, of the 94 U.S. Attorney's Offices, USAOs, more than 40 USAOs have filed federal charges alleging crimes ranging from attempted murder, assaulting a law enforcement officer, arson, burglary of a federally licensed firearms dealer, damaging federal property, malicious destruction of property using fire or explosives, felon in possession of a firearm and ammunition, unlawful possession of a destructive device, inciting a riot, felony civil disorder, and others. Violent opportunists have exploited these demonstrations in various ways. The Guardian. At least 25 Americans were killed during protests and political unrest in 2020. October 31st, 2020, at least 25 Americans were killed during protests and political unrest in 2020.
Also last night, the brave men and women of the United States Secret Service were assaulted by criminals. They threw rocks, they threw urine, and they threw alcohol at our officers. And in several instances, our officers incurred injuries, to include broken bones.
Wow, this is amazing. I could not find any news reporting clips about this. At least 50 Secret Service agents injured by rioters. Rioters threw Molotov cocktails and bottles at agents to set buildings on fire. At least 50 Secret Service agents were injured during weekend protests over the death of George Floyd. Some agents were injured by throwing bottles and Molotov cocktails as they assisted U.S. Marshals and Drug Enforcement Administration agents in monitoring the protest. Fox News reports the National Guard was being called in to help with the response to protests outside the White House and elsewhere in the Capitol. The parish house connected to the historic St. John's Episcopal Church was set on fire late Sunday. The basement was also burned. The New York Daily News reports. Defense Department officials told Fox News the National Guard was being called in to respond to protests outside the White House. Washington Mayor Muriel Bowser said she had requested the Guardsmen to assist local law enforcement.
Secret Service said more than 60 officers and agents were hurt. The National Park Service said 65 park police officers were injured. And during the first week or so, May 29th to June 7th, MPD confirmed 21 injuries. Meanwhile, the National Guard Bureau tells us that 8 guardsmen were injured, including 2 who were struck by lightning. And Arlington County Police told us that 1 Arlington officer suffered a concussion and several others suffered bruises and abrasions. So add it all up, that's at least 155 officers and agents so far And that's just the agencies who responded to her questions. So we can verify, yes, at least 150 officers in D.C. were injured during that first week or so of demonstrations in the district.
If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, please watch part 3, then follow me.